In this video, I'm going to show you how to press tofu and why we press it in the first place. And then I'm going to scramble it into a wonderful scrambled tofu on sourdough toast recipe that is perfect for breakfast or brunch. Although, to be honest, it's delicious enough that I would have it any meal of the day. Now, tofu is an incredible ingredient. It's really nutritious. So it's super high in protein, but it also has a lot of other nutrients in there, in particular isoflavones. These are particular compounds found in the soybeans that tofu is made from that can help to lower our cholesterol. So it's really good to be eating tofu. But people can often say, "Oh, I hate tofu, oh, I don't like it. It's really not nice, it's boring vegan food." Well, I submit to you that rather than they straight up don't like tofu, I would suggest that the tofu that they've tried has been poorly prepared. It's not been particularly tasty. So today I'm going to show you how to properly prepare your tofu so you can load up on fabulous flavors and enjoy an exceptional meal. Let's go, friend. I'm Dr. Ryan Williams, your host and the founder of Growing Pure, where I help you make vegan cooking and health fast, simple, and mind-blowingly tasty. So before we get onto the how we press tofu, first let's talk about why. So tofu is prepared in a very wet environment. There's lots of water there, and it's generally sold with lots of water surrounding it. Now, perhaps the greatest strength of tofu is its ability to soak up flavors from whatever you're cooking it with. So if you cook it with spices or a marinade or a sauce, it's going to absorb a lot of that amazing flavor and become sort of infused throughout it. However, it can't do that if it's already full of water, which doesn't really have any taste. So pressing tofu is essentially just squeezing it. And much like you would squeeze a sponge to drain the water out, we're going to squeeze our tofu and squeeze the water out of it. That way, with the water gone, there is room inside the tofu for it to soak up amazing flavor. And so this way, it's going to taste rich and vibrant rather than watery and bland. Now, there are actually two different types of tofu, and only one of them can be pressed, so it's important to talk about this. We've got firm tofu and silken tofu. So silken tofu will often look something like this. It'll usually come in a sort of cardboard style carton, a sort of card carton, and you will usually find it in the non-refrigerated section of the grocery store. So it'll just be on a shelf somewhere. Now, silken tofu like this, we are not going to press. Why? Because it's too soft. If we try and squeeze it, we'll just squish it and it'll just fall apart. So this kind of tofu, we just have it as is. This usually means it's not going to be quite as rich in flavor because we can't press the water out of it. But if it's in something like a soup or a broth, then we may not need that. So then the other type of tofu is firm tofu. Here's an example. By the way, I'm not affiliated with these brands. These are just the ones that I happen to pick up. So you'll find firm tofu usually in the refrigerated section of the grocery store. And it will often say on it, like this one says here, extra firm. So you can tell that it's going to be firm tofu because it will normally be labeled. So the firm tofu is the one that we can press. It's firm enough that when we squeeze it, it's not going to just fall apart immediately. So then when it comes to our firm tofu, how are we actually going to press it? Well, we have two different options, and I'm going to show you them both. Let's take a look. So when we get our firm tofu out, it's going to look something like this. It's going to be in some kind of package, and you can see it's filled with liquid. This is why we need to press it, because there's so much water already in there. So I'm just going to begin by opening this packet in the sink, just with some scissors and just draining off what water is in there currently. Okay, so then here is our tofu directly out of the packet, still pretty wet. The first option we have for pressing it is by using a little device called a Tofu Press. And I've got one here. So it's a pretty simple thing, really. It's just a little dish or box. And then in that is sort of a little cradle. And this has got some holes in the bottom, as you can see, to allow water to drain out. And it'll sit on these sort of little stilts, so it's not directly sat on the bottom. That goes in there. And then what we would do is put our tofu in there. And then this sort of lid goes on top, just like that. The lid has these sort of elasticated cords on it. So what we would do is put the lid on, and then with these elasticated cords on each side, fasten it on like so. And then we just leave it like that, applying pressure through these elastic bands essentially. So we just leave it for 5 or 10 minutes and then all of the water will be pressed out, or as much as we can get. But if you don't have a tofu press, fear not, because there is another method that's a little bit scrappy, but it works great. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our tofu and get some clean kitchen towel, a few sheets of it, and then we're going to wrap up our tofu in this kitchen towel. So this is to absorb as much of the liquid as possible. So it's all kind of packaged up. Then all we need to do is get something heavy to put on top of this. I often find that a couple of thick books works quite well here. So we literally just put that on top. And then we just leave it like that for 5-10 minutes. That pressure, that weight of those books is going to squeeze that tofu and squeeze out the water, and it'll all be caught in our kitchen towel. If you don't have kitchen towel, a clean tea towel would also work well. Now, whilst my firm tofu is busy pressing, well, it's not really busy, you just leave it, but whilst it's pressing, I'm actually going to also use silken tofu in this recipe. So since silken tofu is soft and it's more kind of liquidy than the firm is, especially after we've pressed it, it works quite well as a liquid element to this dish. So what I'm actually going to do is open up this carton, and then I'm going to blend up the tofu in my blender. You could also mash it up with a fork or something like that if you don't have a blender. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just chop across the top. You see it's already started to crumble just from the pressure of me opening it. So let's see if I can just put it directly into here. Okay, so you can see how easily that broke apart. So you can imagine that if we tried to press this, it would just squish into nothing. So now what I'm going to do is just give this a quick blend up in my blender. That's going to make a nice liquid element to the scrambled tofu. So there's a little bit of creaminess to it. Now my tofu has been pressing away for 10 minutes or so, so now it's time to take a look at it. So I'm going to remove my heavy books, and you can see here that the kitchen paper has become quite wet as the water's been squeezed out. So let's unwrap our tofu now. And here is our wonderfully pressed tofu. It's significantly drier than it was when it went in before it was pressed. So of course scrambled tofu is kind of inspired by scrambled egg. But how much you want it to be like scrambled egg is totally up to you. Still, to get that kind of nice texture, rather than cutting up this tofu into blocks or cubes like you might normally do, what we're going to do instead is crumble this up in our fingers. And so this crumbled firm tofu, in combination with the blended up silken tofu, is going to give a really nice texture. So we've got some kind of crumbledy, scrambledy bits, and then some kind of liquid in there as well. So all I'm going to do is just pull this apart and start crumbling it with my fingers, and just kind of crumble it into little, well, this kind of texture that you can see. One of the great advantages of scrambling tofu, as opposed to any other way you might have it, is that scrambling it exposes a lot of the interior surface. So now suddenly the tofu has got a lot more surface area. What this means is it's got a lot more area to pick up flavour, which is great for us when we're trying to get as much flavour as we can into our tofu. Okay, so there we have it. All of our prep is done for the tofu, so we can get on with the cooking. All right, so here I've got a non-stick pan over a sort of low to medium heat. I'm going to get started with a couple of finely chopped onions. Onions are often a really nice base for a scrambled tofu. So we're not just got the tofu on its own, we've got a little bit more flavor and texture in there. So we just want to let our onions cook for perhaps 5 minutes on their own here. So these onions are cooking away really nicely now. So perhaps at this point, I've got some finely chopped garlic also. So let's get a little bit of that in. So that's just about 4 cloves of garlic there. So just give this perhaps 1 minute or so, just to let that garlic aroma start to come out, let it start to cook a little bit. I think if you're doing this for breakfast, maybe don't use too much garlic, or you could leave it out completely. I love it, so I've got about 4 cloves in here, which I think is really nice, but I tend to find it's quite a savoury taste garlic, so it might not be what you want first thing in the morning. All right, so now we're ready to get all of our tofu in there. So here's our crumbled firm tofu. Let's get that in. I'm also going to add this blended silken tofu. Just give it a little stir around. See that texture? Really, really nice. We've also got a few other things here, and this is a critical ingredient of many scrambled tofus. This is turmeric. So perhaps 2 or 3 teaspoons I've got here. Plenty. That's going to add a nice flavour, but it's also going to add a wonderful yellow colour. Additionally, at this point, I'm going to add a little bit of nutritional yeast. This stuff just tastes fantastic. So a little bit in here I think is going to add a great flavour. And then we're also going to want to season with some salt and some pepper also. Now, one of the really cool things about turmeric is that it's highly anti-inflammatory. It's extremely powerful in its antioxidant capacity. But there is a particular component of black pepper, I believe it's called piperine, this particular compound that actually amplifies the anti-inflammatory properties of turmeric. So if you can have the 2 of them together, it's probably a good idea to do so, because you're going to get the maximum health benefit. And also the flavors of them work well together, right? So that it just works. Black pepper and turmeric taste fantastic together. So that's why I want to make sure I'm definitely getting black pepper in this recipe. So as I move this around, this turmeric is sort of infusing into all of the tofu, and we're getting that lovely yellow color. Really, really nice. So now I'm just going to turn the heat down pretty low and just leave this for another 10 minutes or so, just to all warm through. Now, as my tofu is just happily cooking away there, I'd like to serve this with some spinach. So what I've got here is just a saucepan over a sort of medium heat. I'm just going to add some spinach and just wilt it down. This is going to add a wonderful flash of green color on the top of our tofu, and also some fantastic nutrition as well. So wilting down this spinach should only take a matter of minutes. It cooks really quickly. I'm going to try and evaporate some of this water off from the spinach so it's not too wet. And to help us evaporate the water, we can sort of squeeze the spinach and squeeze out a bit of that water. See how much steam is coming off? The advantage of squeezing it in the pan rather than just pouring the water off is that we're retaining that nutrition from that spinach water. If we poured it off, we'd be pouring away nutrients as well. Okay, and that's it, our spinach is done. And that's all we get out of it once it's wilted down. But that'll be really nice just to add a little bit on top of our tofu. So now the last thing I'm going to do before I serve is just toast off a couple of pieces of sourdough bread. All right, we are ready to serve up. Got these beautiful pieces of bread, so let's get our tofu on there. Just look at that vibrancy, that wonderful yellow colour. And so we've got that nice middle ground of texture as well from the 2 types of tofu. It's not too dry. That looks great. Okay, let's get a couple of little pieces of our spinach on top here. Very nice. Now the only thing I think that I would do to finish this off, and this is optional, but I would quite like it, is just a little pinch of chili flakes. Just that tiny little warming kick. And there we have it. I think if someone served this for me, for brunch, I'd be pretty thankful to them. Let's take a look at it. Now that is what I would call a beautiful looking meal. Now I cannot wait any longer. I have to give this a taste and see if it tastes as good as it looks. That is really tasty. Really lovely flavours coming from that tofu. A few little chili flakes give a touch of heat to this. You're getting a load of flavour. And that tofu that we've pressed and then crumbled and cooked, it's soaked up. All of that turmeric, that goodness, that garlic is in there. Really, really impactful flavours. Now friend, if this video has been helpful to you, I'd like to offer you something else, a free gift that I think will be even more helpful. I want to give you my guide on how to save time in the kitchen. You're going to get my top 5 time-saving hacks that will give you hours of your life back in time that you don't waste with inefficient kitchen techniques. If that sounds like it will be helpful to you, please click on the link in the description below. It is all yours. Now, if you've enjoyed this recipe, there's another recipe video that I've made that I think will really suit you. It's my ultimate recipe for getting glowing skin. It's chock full of the foods that have been scientifically shown to give us a really lovely golden glow in our skin that makes us look healthy and vibrant and attractive. If that sounds interesting to you, click right here and you can watch that. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.